White Skunk. Is a council member White Skunk here? Okay, not right now, not yet. Commissioner Layden.
Good morning. This is Holly Carroll from Douglas County. I'm covering for Commissioner Layden.
Great, thanks, Holly. Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally. I see Jody.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Commissioner Tisdale. I see Ben there.
Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Ben.
See you.
Commissioner Cooper.
Good morning.
Good morning. And I know Ethan will not be able to make it. Brett won't be able to make it. Christina Burry.
Morning.
Good morning, Christina. Amy Moyer, I think, is here. I think I saw her.
Yep. Hey, Dan. Good morning.
Hey, morning, Amy. Mark Morgan. I think I saw Mark.
I'm here.
Great. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Pretty good. How are you doing, Dan?
Good. I know Paige Lewis wasn't able to join this morning, but do we have Carol Walker?
Yeah, good morning, Dan here.
Hey, good morning,
And
Carol.
actually, Dan, just a quick introduction. I'm Rob Addington, sitting in place of Paige Lewis this morning. I work with Paige in our Forest and Fire program. Morning,
Okay,
everyone.
great. Well, thanks for joining us, Rob. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Let's see, Carol's here. Julie Stencil. I see Julie.
Oh, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Julie. Let's see, Christy Belton. There's Christy. Good morning.
Good morning.
I know Pat Dorsey wasn't able to make it this morning. She's traveling, but Scott Jones, I think I saw Scott on there. There's Scott.
Good morning.
Good morning. And then Representative Cutter.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. And then Senator Quorum. Okay, I don't think Senator Quorum was able to make it. Okay, what's the grand total, Angela?
We have quorum. We have 18 members. And just a heads up, Dan, I think you skipped over DFPC. I believe Vaughn Jones is sitting in for Mike Morgan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. So we can check them off. And then just a reminder, per our bylaws and statute, state agency or federal agency reps can set a designee who can attend and vote on their behalf, but appointed members cannot. So if you are here as a designee of an appointed member, just know that you're welcome to participate in discussion, but do not participate in any votes, and we'll just keep an eye on that. Thanks.
Great, Angela. Thanks for that clarification. Appreciate that. Okay, so we do have quorum though, so that's great. And then hopefully everyone had a chance to look at the agenda. Does anyone have any proposed changes to the agenda? Okay, that's good. So the agenda will stand for right now. Also, I just want to remind everyone too, as we look towards 2023 and look towards some of the goals that we really want to work on too, I want to just remind everyone too, like if you have, obviously you're not getting paid to serve on this important commission, but if there are other commitments that come up with work or traveling or whatever it may be, and you're not able to perform your duties, just, give me and Angela a heads up and just let us know if you're not able to continue to fulfill your duties on this council. But my hope is that you're all able to, continue to participate. Okay, so if we don't have any changes for the agenda, we'll keep the agenda as it is for right now. And then also there was a email that was sent out to on looking at the September 29th meeting minutes. And if everyone thinks that looks okay, do we have a motion to approve the meeting summary?
I'll make that
Move
motion.
Second.
Okay, I think Hillary made the motion. Jody maybe was second. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no or nay. Okay, the ayes carry it. Okay, next up is we have vote to approve the amendments to the Wildfire Matters Interim Committee bills from Legislative Committee. And so I believe Commissioner McNally will kind of walk through some of this and maybe some of the amendments that were proposed as well, and then we'll have a little discussion on that.
Excuse me. Thank you, Director Gibbs. I appreciate this opportunity, and thank you to everyone for on the Legislative Council for your work. We have had continually every 2-week meetings, and it's been a very robust conversation, and I appreciate everyone's work. And I want to thank Representative Cutter, who came to one of our legislative meetings and helped walk us through some of these bills. So I'm going to rely on Angela to kind of make sure I cover everything. But we had a meeting, you have to correct me, I think it was a month ago, 2 weeks ago, where we discussed these proposed amendments as we walked through the 2022 Wildfire Matters Interim Committee, the 5 bills that they proposed for introduction into the 2023 Colorado Legislature. And so we met and approved these amendments for 2 of these bills. So I just wanted to kind of walk you through. So bill number 4, which is the bill topic, is forestry and wildfire mitigation workforce. So the first section that we discussed and had a proposed amendment is section 1. It states directs Colorado State Forest Service to develop educational materials for high school guidance and counselors about forestry and wildfire mitigation to share with high school students. The proposed amendment that we discussed and approved is for the Colorado State Forest Service will consult with community colleges in developing these educational materials for high school guidance counselors. The next section that we had a very robust and great conversation with is section 4, 5, and 6. The wording says authorizes the expansion of existing forestry programs through the development of higher education, including wildfire mitigation and the creation of new forestry program within the community college system, and specifically at Colorado Mountain College. So the proposed amendments, and this was pretty much unanimous decision and conversation. We were all on the same page. In section 6, the question is, why is the Colorado Mountain College specifically identified as a college to receive resources to establish a forestry program? We should strike this section and rely on section 5, which provides flexibility in considering where to fund new program establishment or expansion. Additionally, we recommend should have 2 separate funding buckets. One bucket to invest in the existing programs to expand them, and also we want to make sure they could expand rapidly to meet the really high critical need for increased capacity, and a separate bucket to invest in new programs. There is also a concern that on July 1st, 2025, the sunset date is way too soon for these college programs, which may take 2 to 3 years to establish. So we recommend pushing this date back 2 to 3 years. So those are those 2 bills. Then the next one is on bill 4, excuse me. The next bill, do we want to stop there, just discuss that part, or you want me to go through all the recommendations?
Yeah, Jody, let's just see if there are any questions regarding this one. And maybe I do, and Representative Cutter may know the history a little bit better, but so there's a good question on why Colorado Mountain College was specifically identified, and we don't want to limit this, obviously, so the amendment would more or less strike that and make it so all schools could be eligible, more or less. But was the genesis, was there a legislator that was like, hey, I was talking to the president of CMC and we want to create a new program, or do we know a little bit more about why?
Well, I can tell you that I don't know why, and I actually spoke with the co-sponsor, Senator Jaquez Lewis, and she's not in favor of that either. And I couldn't get a hold of the drafter for a good solid answer. So I think the short answer is that we really don't know why, and that I'm sure that she would be. I'm 100% in support of these amendments, and I'm sure that Sonia would, Senator Jaquez Lewis would agree. So. Sorry, that's not a better answer, but I think we can fix it for sure.
All right, that's great. Thank you. That sounds good. Okay, any questions regarding this particular bill number 4? Can't see everyone. Okay, let's move forward then. Let's go to bill 8.
Okay, thank you, Director Gibbs, and thank you, Representative Cutter. Bill number 8, the bill topic is timber industry incentives. So the first section, we talked about section 1, talking about creates an internship program, very similar to bill number 4. And section 2 is a tax credit to incentivize the timber industry. We thought maybe section 1 should maybe just be combined with section 4 and kind of be moved out of that bill and maybe combined with the first bill, bill number 4. We just thought that maybe having those all together would be helpful. And then section 2, sorry, I'm trying to read here. We just were concerned about, the keeping the tax bill credit separate in this bill, and then just basically collapsing the internship in this bill into to bill number 4. So I think those are pretty much our recommendations. That I think that was basically the gist of our concerns with that bill.
Okay, great. Any questions regarding this one? Everything thumbs up?
I might just chime in here and see if, Rob, do you want to share any of Paige's comments that she sent via email?
Let's see, Angela, not specific to this particular amendment. I can chime in a little bit later on some of her input, though.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, yeah, Jody, why don't you move on to maybe Bill 9 then now?
Great, thank you. So bill number 9 is the nursery investments, and Director McCombs did an excellent job helping us understand what is happening there and what the need is. And so this is the fiscal note that went forward with some needed adjustments. And so the Colorado State Forest Service will be working with the sponsors external to this process. The Forest Health Council could provide support for the new cost estimate, which could be 5.2 million versus the 2 million. And we acknowledge it's going to be hard to go back to the legislature and ask for more money when we already have money. But I think we make a strong case for why the needed investments is important to have all of it together to help do, the needs all at once. I think that we could provide support and a lot of background for why we feel this is important to support the extra funding to do those investments and that changes now. And I can see Director McCombs' hand is raised, so I know he lives and breathes this and is there all the time. So I'm sure he can add a lot more details to this discussion.
All right, Matt.
Thank you, Director Gibbs. I like the sound of Dr. McCombs. So we have some work to do, and our intent is to have a really clear ask with very targeted investments associated with these funds. When that process, and hopefully in advance of the assembly session. And so when we get that data, and we have a really clear breakdown of what we can and what we can't afford and how that might impact our ability to move forward efficiently, comprehensively, and in response to other opportunities that are in front of us around reforestation, I will come back to this group with an update and seek your input and your feedback, and of course, your support. So I think that's probably that kind of keeping things external is at this point does make sense, and would recommend that to the body here. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Matt.
And I believe, Director Gibbs, that's where we kind of ended our proposed amendments and discussion with the time that we had allowed, and we didn't go into the other proposed bills at this time.
Okay. Okay, any more questions or comments regarding these amendments? I really appreciate, Jody, your work and everyone's work that serves on this legislative committee. It's important to get this right. So with that, let's formally vote to approve these amendments first. Do we have amendment? Do we have a motion for that?
I'll make that motion to approve the suggested amendments from the legislative committee.
This is
Okay.
Julie Stunsel. I'd second that motion.
Okay, motion's been made by Jody and seconded by Julie. Any more discussions regarding these amendments? Okay, seeing none, let's vote on it. All those in favor signify as aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Okay, the ayes carry it. So great work. So next, let's vote on the package. So let's vote on the interim bills of bills 4, 8, and 9. And do we have a motion for that as amended, of course?
And Director Gibbs, if I may just chime in here, along with this vote, and so this vote is really to say whether the council as a whole supports these 3 bill drafts as they get introduced. And, you know, a representative from the council would likely provide testimony in that respect, you know, to the legislature to say the council supports these bills moving forward. So that's the outcome of this. I think this is part of a broader discussion about expectations for council members as the legislative session approaches. You know, you are, as council members, representatives of the state government to a certain degree, and you, by becoming council members, are acting in good faith as members of the full council. And so this is just a reminder that you know, the council as a whole will have to vote to support individual bills because there likely will be others introduced that this council wants to consider providing support for. The council will have to vote to support those officially and provide that testimony to the legislature. You as individuals outside of your council duties do have the right, of course, to support other bills that the council does not decide there is council support for. But when you do that, you should recognize that you are acting in your personal capacity and not as a representative of the Forest Health Council, if that makes sense. And so we'll send around some language to that effect, just so you have that in your back pocket. If you do find yourself testifying on other bills that might be related or tangentially related to this council's duties. But I would just keep that in mind that, you know, you are serving the state. You've entered into a good faith agreement to serve as a member of the council. And, you know, really this is all to say, if the council votes to support a bill, we expect that that council members, you know, are not sort of speaking in contrary to that decision, if that makes sense. So any questions on that? Okay, great. Go ahead, Director Gibbs.
All right, thanks, Angela. So yeah, do we have a motion to support then these 4 bills, bills 4, 8, and 9 as amended?
So move.
Okay, Mark has made that motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Jody, second that. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay.
I abstain.
Okay, John abstains. Okay. Does anyone else abstain? Okay. The ayes carry it. Thanks again, everyone, especially Jody. Thanks for leading that legislative committee. So next we're going to discuss priority issues for 2023 council meetings. So whether it's issues that the council you think should get more education on or discuss further, or, you know, committee work on. And let me have Angela kind of just remind us all of the statutory authority that we have as we kick off this particular section of our discussion.
Can you see this slide okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
Of the power and duties?
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah.
Great.
And if you're not talking, please mute your phone. I think there's a little background noise.
Great. So thanks, Director Gibbs. We began to have this conversation last meeting on the 29th and at the July meeting as well. But really, you know, this October meeting, we should spend a significant amount of time considering what topics we want to dive into in 2023, because, you know, as you've sort of all seen, the year goes by very quickly. You know, I think we got some great work done this year, but it is important to choose those priorities to really focus on so that you can get some work done. So I'll just read through these just to remind everybody of our power and duties in statute. So 1, to make recommendations for forest health and wildfire mitigation capacity building and funding. 2, development of and recommendations for attaining a 30-year vision for forest health in Colorado, including developing goals, as well as annual and multi-year recommendations for actions to improve forest health and reduce fire risk through increased funding and capacity building. Landscape scale planning to identify state level priorities for forest restoration, wildfire risk reduction, related management, key barriers inhibiting the achievement of those priorities and solutions to overcome those barriers. Monitoring trends related to ecosystem health, forest ecosystem health, including related to climate adaptation and advising on opportunities for state action. Monitoring and identifying opportunities to support and promote synergy across forest-based collaboratives in the state, including coordinating state funding sources and sharing best practices. Identifying strategies for building sustained capacity to conduct forest restoration and wildfire mitigation work at scale through collaboration across agencies, organizations, jurisdictions, public-private partnerships, innovative public and private funding vehicles, shared stewardship, and other solutions, with emphasis on leveraging and maximizing the impact and reach of state funding. And I'll emphasize that, I think the Leveraging Resources Committee really sort of sees this as core to their mission. Identification of workforce development challenges and opportunities, as well as potential regional and statewide economic benefits associated with a significant increase in wildfire mitigation and forest restoration activities. Workforce development is obviously something we focused a lot on this year. So obviously none of these are ever done, but we certainly paid it a good amount of attention this year. Number 8, development and support of solutions to manage and utilize woody material produced by mitigation work, including consideration of climate change and ecological impacts. 9, development of legislative and regulatory recommendations for policies that could support wildfire mitigation and forest restoration goals. Again, this is really a sort of core mission of the Legislative Committee. And then 10, providing technical expertise and recommendations to inform the General Assembly, the executive branch, federal and local agencies on forest health and wildfire mitigation issues. So I hope that's a helpful reminder of, legally what this council is charged with. And so Director Gibbs, I'll pass it back over to you to facilitate a conversation about where folks really want to focus their attention in 2023, so we can start setting up those meetings, both for education, but then also specific things that individual committees may want to discuss or dive into, or if folks feel that we need potentially a new committee to tackle one or more of these duties next year. And perhaps Director Gibbs, before we proceed, you might also want to provide a little update on prescribed fire. There are some notes on that. And that is an issue that we've received a lot of interest in. So I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Angela. And yeah, before we open it up, I do want to recognize that quite a few members have brought up prescribed fire, and that should be something that we should really understand more and kind of learn more. And so I know that the Colorado Fire Commission, they have a subcommittee on prescribed fire. So my hope is that we'll invite those members to present to us. I think Vaughn's on here, but at likely probably the January meeting that we have, or April, to give us kind of an understanding of what they're contemplating and working on as well, so we can collaborate on that. And again, we've heard from many folks that agree that we need to really dive into this issue more. So, and that's the plan for one of the topics for sure. So Jody, it looks like your hand is raised. I'll turn it over to you.
Director Gibbs, I can.
I think I can't. Can we not
Wait,
hear
if
you?
you want to,
Oh,
if you're
there we
ready,
go.
unless you're ready for. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I
I'll turn
can
off
hear you
my.
now.
I'll turn off my camera. Sometimes that helps. One of the reasons I'm working very hard to improve broadband in my county is because I have some of the worst county internet service for commissioners. So the one thing that popped up with some of our, I don't know if Angela could put those back up, but the priorities is the woody products and mitigation of the woody materials. That was something that kind of sparked my interest that maybe as we're increasing this capacity and there's going to be a lot more forest mitigation work. I know in my county, I'm helping with some smaller communities just down from the Cameron Peak Fire that's still dealing with trying to, they have piles of woody material and from the flash flooding and the debris flows that they're still trying to find money to how they can move that out. And I know as a county, we're looking to do some zero waste management of that material. And we have some things on the horizon coming to be announced and discussed soon publicly. But I just know that we have some slash yards that we share with Boulder County and Larimer County that it seems like there's a lot of material and not a lot of places to place it for even private landowners who'd like to have somewhere to take it and coordinate it. And so I was just wondering if that's something that with the increased capacity and supporting the increased mitigation work that we also need to make sure we have the capacity and ways to manage the woody material after the mitigation. So that's just something I thought maybe we should have a discussion on to make sure it's kind of following the other, it's kind of like toggles after the other increased work. Just my thoughts right for one of those ideas for a priority.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Yeah, do other folks want to weigh in on this topic too, on woody biomass material and what to do and making sure we have markets and so forth? I know that's probably near and dear to Matt McCombs and Mark Morgan and others. So,
Yeah, and I'll weigh in. I mean, it's a topic that each county, each region, each jurisdiction seems to find a different solution for, and sometimes it's that there are like cogeneration plants that it's possible. It's just that there's issues are complex, and utilization of woody biomass for like power production. You need a reliable supply. Sometimes it's the easiest way to get rid of stuff is to burn it in piles, but then there are different examples of single like district heating facilities. I think Boulder County heats one of the road and bridge shops with woody biomass that they burn on site. It's complex, but it needs, we should inventory all of the different tools that have been proven, I guess, around the state, and then see which ones could be scaled or could be replicated in other places.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Ben. Does anyone else like to speak on this particular topic?
I would like to, if I could.
Yeah, sure, Mark.
This is, you're exactly right there, and it is an extremely complex issue. A lot of people have worked on it for a lot of years, and there's been a lot of effort along here. I think the one thing that's truly correct there is no silver bullet. There is nothing that you can do that's going to work in one area, another area. It's very, very regional in how it's handled. And then the other thing is that one of the first questions you have to ask is, how much of this material do you want to generate? And what I mean by there are lots of silvicultural systems to improve forest health that do not involve producing a bunch of biomass material. There are mastication projects, there are burning projects. There's a great many tools out there. So the first question you really have to ask is how much of this you're going to generate. I think that comes before what you're going to do with it after you generate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I see quite a few hands up, Christina, Hillary, Matt, and Holly, but just want to focus on woody biomass material for right now. So do you all want to speak on that topic?
Okay. Yes,
Okay,
it's
great.
related.
Let's do Christina, Hillary, Matt, and then Holly.
So I think to getting to Mark's point, I do think having, and this relates to one of the other priorities, I think on the first slide previous to this one, is the landscape scale planning. And so I think in order to incentivize the industry, there has to be an identification of the projects, the amounts, and also it be very transparent as to where the projects are planned and the landscape scale projects that have already happened. And so I think being able to tie the woody biomass issue along with a lot of the other priorities listed on these slides, I think it does come back to the landscape scale planning and lining out not just priority areas, but like where are the projects taking place and what are the quantities of timber or woody biomass that are projected to come off the landscape. So I think in order to have that, I do think one centralized like mapping tool or location. I know a lot of the Pacific Northwest states have a tool that showcases all the treatments that have been done, and even taking it further, the planned treatments. And as part of that inventory and kind of landscape planning, it also relates to taking inventory of the current state of where those industry locations are or industry opportunities. So I almost see like a mapping tool that shows, okay, here's where the treatments have occurred. We know that there's work in these areas, and then where the planned projects are, and then maybe even an informational layer as to like where the current industry opportunities are. And it would be a very transparent way, an easy way to draw attention to that by legislators, but also industry folks as well, and people planning these projects. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Christina. Let's move to Hillary and then Matt and then Holly. Oh, Hillary, you still there? Okay, you may be having a technical issue, but let's move to Matt.
So just real quick, thanks, Director Gibbs, and thank you for Christina for her comments, because they are right in line with a lot of dialogue that's been going on across a lot of different places. And so just a couple things for this group to be aware of. First, hopefully by the beginning of next summer, a multi-year biomass study that the State Forest Service has been leading will be completed. And we will have a really clear, factual, science-based estimate of what the full yield is as it relates to associated with the type of treatments that we might pursue. And so that's a kind of a game changer as it relates to our ability to market Colorado's excess biomass as it relates to wildfire mitigation, forest health, to industry. And second to that is this I really appreciate Ms. Murray's comments on prioritization and transparent mapping around where our goals and objectives are. And so some of the conversations we had this at RMRI in Durango, and we've been having them kind of around this community, and I look forward to bringing them to this group, is how do we get to sort of a bang for the buck map for these key areas all across the state, and have a really narrowed focus on where we start and then how we finish it. And then nexus that with planning, right? Whoever wins the NEPA race as it relates to our federal partners sort of wins the game, right? If you have planning in place, industry sees that as a reliable place for them to invest in the short term with benefits long term. So I look forward to keep having this conversation around a bang for the buck mapping exercise for, perhaps, we start somewhere regionally and then we move from there, because I think there's a huge amount of opportunity to substantially not only accelerate our at-scale treatments, but our at-scale planning. And that's really where I think we need to move as a state, is to at-scale regional planning, which involves getting collaborative entities in, starting to talk regionally and a variety of other things. But the tools are coming into play, the Forest Collaboratives Network, the amazing resources we have at CFRI, and some of the working models that we have all across the state. So those are topics that we can dig into, I think, going forward. And the last thing I'd close with is a lot of interesting things happening with biofuels and tall wood buildings, right? So this mass timber CLT concept. So that's another one I think we might at least bring some people in and have some interesting conversations about if we're gonna go, 90 buildings vertical all around Ball Arena where Elitch's is currently in the long run, or if there's gonna be redevelopment all across the Front Range, wouldn't it be amazing if some of those buildings were made of some of that excess biomass? And we have some experiments, some groundbreaking industries here in pockets of Colorado that could be bellwethers of how that might come into fruition in the long run. So those are just some other things that we might want to talk about going forward.
Great, thanks, Matt. Let's move to Hillary and then Holly.
Thanks. My Mac computer just crashed on me. I've never had that happen on a Mac. I just want to reiterate what Director McCombs just said. I've been working on forest health issues across the state for over 2 decades now, and biomass is just sort of this sexy word that keeps coming up as a viable solution, and yet it has not been. And so I think we really need to understand where's the technology at, what the potential really is, what the capacity of our forests are. It just feels like it's a word that continues to be thrown around, and yet haven't seen really a lot of results from it. And those of us who like Jody, who have these piles and keep hearing that this is a solution, are still looking at the piles. So let's really understand what the technology and it'll be interesting to see that report. But it's just been frustrating to me to continue to hear it as a viable solution, and yet it really has not been. And I think there was a comment in the chat of, the analysis of emissions, the cost benefit of emissions versus our climate change impacts is a really important piece of that too.
Great, thanks, Hillary. Next up is Holly.
Thank you. Just a quick update on behalf of Commissioner Layden. We are running into some issues as well with the biomass topic. We are looking at beginning some efforts on a shaded fuel break that will run about 30 miles basically north to south on our border with the Pike National Forest. And we're working closely with the Forest Service on this, as well as some of our fire departments. But that's definitely going to generate quite a bit of this biomass. And we're trying to understand ways that we might be able to solve that issue here in the county. And we would definitely be open and look to potentially partner with any of you on any solutions that you might also have. And then just real quickly to speak to the mapping issue. Again, we're working with the Forest Service and our fire mitigation specialists here to do some mapping of all the treatments that have already taken place in this shaded fuel break area to get a better idea of where we need to focus our resources and energy, and maybe where we don't. So we would also be very open to working with anybody on some mapping efforts as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Holly. I appreciate that. Any other topics regarding or any other comments regarding like woody biomass and kind of landscape planning? Hillary, is that a hand up? No, okay. I'll just add my 2 cents. I obviously think this is very important too, and it looks like Amy has a comment. But Amy, why don't you go, and then I'll speak after you.
There we go. Sorry, had
trouble. We have Mark Morgan as well. So Amy and then Mark. Okay.
Thank you, Dan. I just had one comment as we think about landscape level planning and mapping tools. Is one of the discussions that's come up during our leveraging resources committee is thinking about the Colorado Forest Atlas and better understanding the processes that drive those mapping efforts. And I think from my perspective as well, representing West Slope Water is thinking about conversations of when do some of the strategic focus areas, potentially with COSWAP, when do some of the high risk fire sheds with the U.S. Forest Service get revisited, that largely eliminate a lot of the West Slope, and in terms of water, some of our more critical watersheds and water infrastructure. And so as more resources continue to develop for fuels treatment, for fire mitigation, how do we have a say or have a conversation about those maps and what are those layers that are driving those strategic focus areas? And so I think that's my comment is there an opportunity for the forest health council to better understand some of those mapping tools, better understand the drivers for how some of those counties are lighting up in those maps.
Okay, Mark and then Jackie.
Thank you. I've been dealing with biomass. My company has produced it and marketed it. We started in 1979 doing that. And you learn a few things along the way. One of the things that you learn is that by and large, if you're going to capture biomass and transport it, that you're using fossil fuels to do that. It's diesel run equipment, it's heavy equipment. And so transportation becomes absolutely critical. And one of the problems here in Colorado is we have very narrow mountainous roads. And we generally generate this biomass in our mountain conditions where we're trying to do WUI work. And then we have to transport it a long ways to the markets where the stuff could be processed or burned. So one of the things that you might look at doing this is developing your biomass utilization burners or whatever you're going to do in as close to the source of the material as possible for your mountain communities or whatever. It makes it a great deal more affordable and it makes it a great deal more competitive. It's hard to burn biomass to compete with a lot of the other fuel sources. You can burn biomass to compete with propane delivered in mountain environments. So I think you might think about that. If you run into these problems with marketing biomass, transportation, and your overall fossil fuel costs to begin with are one of your big impediments.
Great. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate your thoughts on that. Jackie.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do I not weigh in on this one, right, Dan? We're having all the conversations and the work around, with the bills money and the Inflation Reduction Act money coming, the Forest Service is trying to figure out, what's the right mix. And we hear you on the Western Slopes. We've heard that loud and clear, and we recognize, there's reducing fire risk and improving the landscape around watersheds. And those are tied together. I mean, forest health, watershed health, and reducing fire risk, they're really all linked. So we, we're in the middle of this big question about, what to do with the biomass. And I think we all recognize, the situation, especially on the front range, of we've got a lot more material than we can probably burn. And so I do wholeheartedly support the advancing that conversation around prescribed burning, Dan. But if there is some way, and Mark laid it out really well, that we can utilize the biomass, but you have to come at it more localized, then there's just not enough money or value in it to ship it long distances. But if there's some way that the state could help us even come up with incentives, or, when we talk about what could we support at a state level, it's that, renewable energy or energy that, that could come from biomass, and can we incentivize that? So, I mean, we're digging deep into this. We've got a lot of folks working on it, both with our research station and internally, but it's going to take all of us as partners to think through it. And I did want to mention, so we have, I think most of you, or a lot of you, probably received an invite for November 14th, coming from NFF. It's that next round of conversation as a follow-up to that first engagement we had around the bills funding and where that priority work should be, and how we are mapping it, and what should we be thinking about. So I believe for us in the Rocky Mountain, November 14th is that next opportunity to engage. And if you've gotten an invite to that, I really encourage you to join us, and help us think through that. Help us think through the mapping, help us think through, potential solutions. And and so it's exciting, it's daunting, and but it's necessary for us to do this. So anyway, Dan, I mean that when you say the words biomass, I don't think of it as sexy, you guys. I think of it as painful now, but it's but it's a necessary and very critical, important topic for all of us. So
Well, Jackie,
That's
in your
my-
years working for the Forest Service, I'd imagine you're seeing more funds than you've ever seen, I'm sure, over the
Yeah,
last couple of years.
yeah, I've never seen anything like what we've got, and even on that Front Range project. But the Front Range, you know, the ARP and the Pike, the northern end of the Pike, they're not the be all sum all of the work in this state, and we know that. And so help us figure out, you know, how to move that out and how do we advance that into some of those other critically important areas like the Western Slope. I mean, I think with RMRI, we've got a good chunk of work going on down in the Southwest, but still work to be done there too. But yeah, it's unlike any times we've ever seen before, Dan.
Yeah. Hey, Jackie, in the chat, a few folks have asked about that meeting on November 14th. I don't know anything about it either. But some folks are asking like, hey, you know, can I attend it or can we learn more about it? What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, shoot me a note. So this is the, if you know, the NFF had that first engagement around the infrastructure bill and investments. This was back, well, it was back last March, you know, so that was the initial kickoff. And we invited a host of folks, partners, you know, to participate in that. So this is round two. And, you know, I just got my invite, I think this week, maybe Tuesday. And anybody that was invited the first time should be on that list. But if you have an interest in attending, let me know. And I'll try to see if we can add some folks on, you know, because again, as we look across the rest of Colorado, I think we need to make sure we have, you know, a variety of folks in that conversation. It won't be just Colorado, Dan. It'll be, you know, for the Rocky Mountain region. So we'll have folks from the other 4 states, but probably you know, a larger partner focus on Colorado for sure. So if you guys have an interest, drop me a note and I'll see what I can do. I'll be running the lead with it, probably with Tara Humphreys for the region. But I'm 99% sure it's the 14th of November.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for that info. And Mark, I see your hand up. Is that a legacy hand up or is that another hand?
Yes, it is. It's my inability to run a computer worth a dang.
It's okay.
I got my okay.
Great. Any other comments regarding woody biomass or landscape work? Just raise your hand or speak up. I'll weigh in too. I agree. This is extremely important. Some folks have mentioned kind of getting the right locations or the right maps and so forth. I know Tony Chang and the Restoration Initiative Institute have worked really hard, I think, on phase 1 of this mapping exercise to really get a good understanding of what projects have been done on the landscape, whether it's U.S. Forest Service doing the work or the State Forest Service or County Open Space or Denver Water or whoever it may be. And I think that's really, really critically important that we look at, you know, statewide, where these landscapes have been done, where the gaps are, and are these really critical gaps that we think really need to be treated, and also have it overlaid with what NEPA work has been done and what NEPA work needs to be done in the future. And just kind of pretending that just like you've heard me all talk about wildfires, don't know the difference between federal, state, private, or tribal lands. I really feel strongly we need to look at a forest health landscape of looking at all lands and how we all work together in a collaborative way to get work done that's meaningful and important for Colorado. So I would love to see us continue to work on this mapping to really have a good understanding of what's out there, where the gaps are, what needs to be done in the future. So with that, let's move to other topics that folks may want to explore during this coming year. And then Angela, I think what we're thinking, Angela and I haven't really discussed it, but I assume we're gonna put together a list, and then we can probably send out like a doodle poll or something like that too, so we can zero in on some of these topics, is my guess. Rob and then Hillary.
Yeah, thank you, Director Gibbs. And Paige did send this information to both Angela and me, but just quickly on behalf of Paige, a few of the things that she and I have had some discussion about that we think would be good topics for the group. Several consistencies here with what's already been discussed, but certainly a vote for an emphasis on prescribed fire. Paige provided some good framing questions around what is needed to resolve barriers to robust engagement in prescribed fire by non-federal entities. Are there legislative or policy solutions we need to consider in order to build an effective fire workforce to support critical forest management? So a good emphasis on workforce there specifically. As it relates to the infrastructure investment and the bill funding and the Inflation Reduction Act, around implementation and coordination, how are these new federal investments touching down in Colorado? Are they being strategically deployed and leveraged in conjunction with state and other dollars? What could the council do to ensure we maximize bringing these dollars to benefit Colorado's forest and communities? And then lastly, to the discussion on post-fire reforestation and related to Director McComb's points on Bill 9, just continued emphasis there. What is needed to fully address post-fire reforestation in Colorado, particularly on non-federal lands and in burn scars where natural regeneration is not likely to occur? What are state, federal, private, and NGO roles? What can the council do to support effective state leadership and support NGO partners in addressing this challenge? And how are Replant Act dollars being brought to bear? So again, several good framing questions that Paige provided around these topics that Angela has as well, but just wanted to put those out for the group. And Director McCombs would certainly be interested in any follow-up. I think this would likely be offline, but just any follow-up on the questions around reforestation and the role for NGOs like the Nature Conservancy, if there's a way for us to plug in on the assessment that's being discussed, and then some of the framing questions that Paige provided there.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. That's a great list. Would anyone like to comment or add to anything on Rob's list? Also, Paige sent that out to everyone as well. Those are all important topics that, yeah, let's discuss more. Hillary.
Thanks. I agree. That was a great list and appreciate you guys taking the time to put it together. I would add a couple things. One is this idea of GIS optimization mapping that several of our regions are undertaking to really identify existing conditions on the forest and then be able to use those existing conditions and the latest climate projections, water resource, temperature changes, all of that to model conditions in the future, which we at least here on the GMUG or specifically in our watershed are using to prioritize our work on the forest. And I think there's some opportunities. CSU has been really exploring this concept, and we're working with a team that's led by CSU professor Dr. Seibold. I think that there is an opportunity to do that on a sort of statewide landscape scale, and would love to bring in some of those resources to just talk through with the group. I know there's some folks in the conservation community have been doing kind of a similar thing on creating zones, maybe at a larger than Colorado scale, but it'd be interesting to see where they're at on that work as well. So just bringing those resources in to inform our efforts moving forward to really focus on that forest health and prioritization piece. And then the kind of along with that is understanding the latest science on climate impacts on Colorado. There's so much evolving science, and we have some great teams, especially at CSU, who are studying all of that. And oftentimes I've seen the use of past science and sort of past climate projections on applying to our forests that are now outdated and really don't help our efforts. And the third, I think we're going to discuss next is this concept of old growth and identifying old growth. And we're still, of course, waiting for guidance from the Forest Service and the BLM on how that is going to be identified and implemented, how the president's emergency orders or executive order is going to be implemented. But I just ask that we keep that on the list, and that could potentially be done as the kind of GIS optimization or prioritization project.
Great, thank you, Hillary. That's great. Other topics you think we should discuss and dive into looking at 2023? I'm really curious with some of the water folks here, like Amy and Christina, and I know Mark Shea, I think, is on too. And what more can we do on kind of the forest health / watershed health? As many of you, I think, may be aware, Water Conservation Board, we received some funding to do a remind me the name, Angela, watershed, the watershed ready.
Wildfire ready watersheds.
Wildfire ready watershed, yeah, components. And I was just texting Kevin Reedy to see how many communities he's worked with around the state. But that's just, I think, pretty tremendous work that you could work with local communities to do some proactive planning using LiDAR technologies and so forth, to really have a good understanding of, if you do or when you do have fires, how it's going to impact your water quality and quantity and the health and safety of people that live in your communities. And it just seems like it's so important now more than ever. And I'd love to see that program expand, but I'm just curious from water folks, is a program like that really useful for you all, or should we explore other programs, or just, yeah, what more can we do, I guess?
It's extremely helpful. I was at the Sustaining Colorado Watersheds Conference, and Chris Sturm gave a really good presentation about the program. We're really excited about the program. Wildfire Ready Watersheds, I think it really draws that tie between community protection and water supply protection that we needed. And I think it's easily understood by a lot of people that it's thinking about it on a landscape scale, on a watershed scale, protecting communities, but also protecting water supplies and infrastructure. So I think it's great. I see the 6 steps that Chris Sturm outlined as part of that process, and being a wildfire ready watershed is capacity building, stakeholder collaboration, data collection, post-fire hazard analysis, susceptibility analysis, and pre-disaster mitigation activities. So I think it's the benefit to it is that it's taking all the proactive work and needs on the proactive forest management side, but also thinking about those acres that you can't treat for whatever reason. Maybe it's roadless, maybe it's too steep. But the concept of wildfire ready watersheds is critical in that it's a holistic approach. We need prescribed fire, we need forest, traditional mastication forest management up front prior to the fire. But in addition to that, how can communities or water utilities be ready for when a fire occurs in the watershed, and thinking about that susceptibility analysis and post-fire hazard planning in addition to the proactive management. And I would say from Denver Water's perspective, we've done a lot of work on the proactive side, but I think there's a huge need to think about, okay, if a fire burns in these critical watersheds, communities, what can be done prior to that fire to plan for it. And I think everyone needs more thought and planning behind that.
Yeah, great, thanks. Amy, Mark Shea, any other folks from the water community want to weigh in on any of that?
Yeah, I'll just chime in quickly, and I think Christina really did a nice job. So I don't need to elaborate much more on the wildfire ready watersheds, but we'll talk about it a little bit later in this meeting when we give an update on the Leveraging Resources Committee, that thinking about a pre-fire playbook and how to dovetail that with the Wildfire Ready Watersheds Initiative has been a topic of discussion in our subgroup that we can get into a little bit more, but I think it absolutely dovetails with better connections on pre-fire planning, post-fire actions, and connecting all of those players early on before a fire. And, maybe the other just piece to add on the water side is, I think, forests continue to become at the forefront of water policy, and on the West Slope, everybody had seen the news article after news article about crisis on the Colorado River, and we continue to have to remind our lower basin colleagues that there is a river above Lake Powell, and it is important for us to maintain a healthy forested watershed for the source water protection, and that we are the first link in an immense chain across 7 states for water supply, and how much of the Colorado River comes from our headwaters. And so that has been a critical focus of maintaining that, it's not just a water conversation, but it's integrally connected to our forested watersheds.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. And also, I know Mark Shea is not a voting member, but he is here. I don't know, Mark, if you want to use kind of your public comment period, if you have anything to add on water, feel free. I'll use the chair's prerogative to invite you if you want to say any few words. Okay, you can come back if you need to. Mark Morgan.
I would like to echo everybody's previous comments. They're excellent. Back when I started school in 1969, my forestry professor said that here in Colorado, water is the dog and forestry is the tail. And I think we've always had to manage forests for water quality and water production. I think one important point here, everything that you mentioned about the planning, especially Christina, appreciate those comments. One plan that we need is when you have an existing forest fire, so that we have plans for our management goals when a fire is underway. Any incident management team that comes in steers and drives fires. They actually they have a plan, they make choices. And I think one thing we forget, those incidences are when the major amount of management happens. Like up here, we managed exactly half of the Arapahoe Road and the Medbo and the route with 3 fires 2 years ago. We managed half our acreages in a matter of days or weeks. And that planning in advance for how we're going to pursue those, I think, is critical. And also that planning also interacts between state agencies, communities, and Federal Forest Service or BLM. So some input by all of those groups in advance how these fires are going to be managed, I think, is critical because it affects everybody after the fact. And I couldn't echo everybody else's comments even more. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. Okay, I want to open it up still for any other topics you think we should explore, and you don't have to give everything to us at this moment. If there are other items that kind of come to your mind in the next week or two, you can just email it to me or Angela, and we can get that on the list.
Director Gibbs, do you mind if I just
please
solicit some opinions on the development of and recommendations for a 30-year vision for forest health in Colorado? I know when we talked about this at the beginning of 2022, folks said, you know, we need some time to work on a couple issues first before we really dive into, you know, a thought exercise that's this extensive. So I'm just curious if people have thoughts about that. You know, again, we don't have any requirements as to sort of when we start to address that, but at some point in our sort of first term, if you will, here in these first 5 years. So just curious if folks have thoughts.
I'll jump in real quick, Angela. Just, you know, the State Forest Service, we've been moving through an exercise of the last 3 months, pivoting to an outcome-based work planning effort, right? With this, trying to sharpen our awareness of what it is that we're in service to, right? On a daily basis, on an annual basis, on a decadal basis. And so this question around a 30-year plan really speaks to this, in my mind, this idea of outcome-based work. So painting a picture of the future, what does it look like when we're done? You know, that might take decades of sustained work and commitment as really as a people in this state. And so I'm actually really excited about this requirement and as it relates to our responsibilities. But I would say that it may be that there might be some, that pause button that we hit at the beginning might still be on, and that, you know, there's just we're talking about comprehensive planning, comprehensive mapping, balancing the focus on the Front Range as it relates to the 10-year strategy, noting we have a huge responsibility and there's a huge need in our collection points all across the watersheds of the West. And so I might advocate that, like, we just give this conversation a little bit more time, but keep coming back to this idea that at some point in the relatively near future, we should hopefully have a clearly painted picture of what our shared future looks like as it relates to fundamental changes in the nature of the landscape, fundamental changes in the nature of the way people see that landscape and interact with it. You know, I have a dream that someday the people of this state will not see a single age stand of an unbroken forest as a healthy forest. And then also that piece around what is the sustainable use for the biomass that we know will generate into perpetuity if we continue to tend and manage forests with an ecosystem mindset. So that was a lot, but I just wanted, I love this, that this is part of our work. But I would say, at least from our perspective, we are still in that early stages of painting, even for just the agency, what that long-term future might look like. So it might be this one that we kind of come back to maybe in 24.
Great, thanks, Matt. Other comments? What are we missing for coming this, 2023? We can think about it more and come back. So,
Director Gibbs.
Yeah, Jody.
I'm just thinking, as I'm listening here, there's just so much happening. So much going on, so many plans, so many groups. There's so much work. Even in my county, I'm like, wait, what's happening? I didn't know that was happening. Can I learn more? Is there a way we could, and I know leveraging resources, we've had some of these conversations, is how, I think we had started a spreadsheet of all the different grant opportunities, but just even what the mitigation work or even the different groups. I don't know if we have all those tools in place for us just to refer to about who's where, what, when, how. I mean, I don't know if that's a necessary tool for us to try to bring together. It's a lot of work, but I don't know if that's already existing or if that's somewhere on someone's website or something in a database, just how we as even members can refer back to if we want to learn more or understand kind of that what is currently happening. Because there's just, for me, it seems like there's so much going on, even in my fellow commissioners' counties. I was just looking up Commissioner Cooper's county and doing a little research, and I know she sent some things that they're doing, and I've been reading Jefferson's County Forest Health Plan, and it just I'm just curious how the group feels about as we bring all these things together. Do we need to have something like that, like a central location of it the best we can to gather everything into one place, and just thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Jody. Any follow-up on Jody's comments? So I know historically at the end of our meetings, obviously we have like agency and various different updates that people can share, you know, what's going on in their community or the entity that they represent, but we capture all that information on all of our notes. And I'm trying to think, Angela, do we put that on our website too? Like, I'm just thinking of a clearinghouse potentially on at least all the activities for this committee. We have
Yeah,
that
I think-
on our website, right?
I think it sort of depends on what type of information you're after, Commissioner Shattuck McNally. So, you know, all of our meeting summaries are posted on the website, but then of course you'd have to sort of sift through all of them to remind yourself of what was discussed. I do think there are a couple useful resources that speak to the feeling you're having of just wanting better awareness of what's going on. So, you know, for instance, on COSWAP's webpage, we do have that summary table of all the wildfire mitigation focused grant programs that are out there, both state and federal. And I can point folks to that if they haven't seen it in a while. You know, I think something we could do would be link to, for example, I think Katie's going to be on later in the call today, but the Colorado Forest Collaborative Network would certainly have information on all of the forest collaborative groups in the state. You know, there's already actually an older map up on their Center for Collaborative Conservation website that maps out where all the forest collaborative organizations are in the state, so you can at least get a picture of that. But then as far as what individual counties are doing, and Director McCombs, I'll look to you. You know, the State Forest Service did, for example, have, you know, I think links to CWPPs. But beyond that, I don't think there's a clearinghouse for, you know, like forest management planning, you know, for individual counties or smaller jurisdictions.
Not in any like really well consolidated outward facing, you know, catch-all website, right? So I think but we have opportunity here. So we're in the early stages of standing up an organization that will take over the Community Wildfire Defense Grant Program administration of that on behalf of the U.S. Forest Service, either next year or potentially the year after. And part of that will come with some administrative funding and maybe some opportunities to use a new website that we're developing in cooperation with CSU to start capturing exactly, you know, to some degree, all of the different working models that are being developed and all the resources that people are bringing to bear on the problem and the challenges we're facing. And that, you know, and I was just sort of reflecting on Jody's comments that, like, it is, I mean, with every single topic we've talked about, I'm like biting my tongue to be like, there's like so much stuff I could bring you up to speed on, but some of it's just not ripe, some of it's in motion, some of it's theoretical, and we just don't have the time. But I would love to think through with anybody that's interested, how we come up with some sort of real-time mass communication mechanism to just keep this body in the conversation and the multiple conversations that are going on. Or maybe just schedule some somewhat long-form updates for some of the key entities that are sort of touching a lot of these issues, so that we could have just a really concentrated update on all the different conversations, their options that are in front of us. Because I really want this group to participate in those conversations to the extent that we can, because there's so many great stakeholders, and many of these folks are already deeply invested in that conversation anyways. But that, I mean, I even threw out like, maybe I should start a podcast, right? I don't know, something to be able to like mass communicate in long form, all the things that are going on, so that people could just be aware and participate. So I'm open to anybody's thoughts on how we could do that. One is CFRI is trying to figure out how to, you know, I forget what the name of the database is, Angela, where they're trying to put together all of the, in polygons, easily accessible. Here's all the work that's done. Here's the work that's planned. We're certainly supportive of that concept. The Forest Atlas has great opportunities to grow in that way. We have an internal tracking database that we just stood up called GeoTracks that I'm asking staff, could that be outward facing? So there's a lot of things. We just have to find the time to suss through them and determine what we think is going to work best for Colorado.
Great, thanks, Matt. I think John Ring, you made some recommendations and you have something to say about this as well.
Yeah, so this is a great point. And I think we talked about this in our committee as well, is, we need a clearinghouse for all our veg treatments in the state, right? And a good example is Utah's Watershed Restoration Initiative. I mean, I think if not all veg treatments goes through, in this case, it's the state. But, the BLM gives millions of dollars to it, through our fuels, wildlife, forestry programs. And then the projects are gone through and prioritized and then funded, right? And it's, it has private entities, county entities, it's the whole gamut. So I think, if you're looking for an example, that's probably a good one. It's basically a veg treatment clearinghouse for the whole state. I mean, and if you just type that into Google, you can look up projects, maps, you can see how much work they've done, it's pretty amazing. So I would suggest something like that. I don't know if the state can take on something like that at this moment, but it's pretty interesting how it works. It is a bit of work to keep everything coordinated and everybody on the same page. But again, if you're looking for something, I think that's a good example at least. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, John, we'll take a look at that Utah WRI, but if more immediately we could propose for our next meetings that we just dedicate plenty of time so folks can really give people a good understanding of everything that they're working on. And then we could make sure that we capture that, and whether that's in Google Docs or, we can figure out where it could live, but we can make sure there's adequate time, because there is like so much, like for the DNR, like we're finalizing our budget, and there could be really exciting things to announce, but the budget will be formally announced by the governor November 1st. But there'll be more to share after that. But at this point, there's a lot in the works, but we just can't say anything right now. So yeah. Okay. Let's see, Christy.
Thank you. So real quick, a couple of my thoughts for the upcoming year. My number one thought was, is there a way to streamline, just building on this conversation we're having right now, is there really a way to streamline what everybody around the state is doing? And maybe even establishment of some sort of a dedicated staff central hub, if you will. Maybe I checked out that website, the Utah's WRI website, and if that could be a good example, is that something that we could focus on? The reason I'm asking this is because I feel a pretty extreme sense of urgency for forest fires that are going to be happening over the next few years, and if we can streamline information and organizations, perhaps we'll be better able to prevent some of those. And I've started to get involved here locally as a result of this committee, and I'm finding the same thing, that even on a local level, it's sort of like a shotgun approach, because we're all kind of learning as we go here. And I do think a central hub where it's recognized, funded, dedicated, and recognized to be sort of a hub might benefit everybody in the long run. That's thought number one. Thought number two is the obvious for me, the drum I've been beating for a while, which is, immediate fuels reduction with timber work, grazing, the mastication, all of that kind of stuff. The more that we can do in the near future, I think the better off that we will be to reduce the chances of these forest fires getting out of control. So those are my 2 thoughts.
Thanks, Christy. Jody.
Thanks, Director Gibbs. I'm gonna turn off my camera just so you can hear me better. I was looking at the website too, but I think another important piece of this, not only for all of us to understand what's happening and all the projects happening, but also to help educate the public who might be, have concerns about prescribed fire, about some mitigation work or what is going on. And it might help us educate and raise awareness for the public in general as we're trying to get this work. So we have support for funding and projects and kind of a collective buy-in across the whole state if they can see the progress and what is happening. So that's another benefit that we haven't talked about, is just educating the public at large about the work that's going on.
Great, thank you. Other comments as we prepare and explore what topics we discuss in 2023? Okay, I think this is a really good start, and what we'll do is we'll put this together in a document, send it out, and kind of have folks be able to kind of weigh in on what they think we should tackle first. Does that sound good, everyone? Okay, excellent. Okay, next up we have finalized dates and locations for our 2023 Forest Health Council meeting. So let me just turn over to Angela. I think she'll share with us maybe some of our options, but we also want to think about, maybe getting around the state and seeing who can help host us, who has particular location or space available that we could potentially meet at. So Angela, let me turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And we can keep this pretty short here so we can get to our break. I know we're a little bit behind time, but so we have proposed basically the end of each quarterly month next year for our meetings. I haven't heard any massive pushback to these approximate dates from folks, with the exception that Director Gibbs let me know this morning that the National Fire Commission is actually interested in having a meeting in Colorado on these January dates, or sort of close to. So I think that's a big question that we'll have to resolve, about whether we could still host this meeting sort of piggybacking on that, or whether it's just going to be too much. So Director Gibbs, maybe we can talk about that. But again, we spoke to this a little bit last meeting, and we had some folks volunteer their communities to potentially host meetings later in the year. I think we'd at least like to have 2 hybrid, in-person meetings with a hybrid option, but we didn't solidify anything. So do folks have meeting space that has hybrid meeting capabilities that they would be willing to provide for one of the meetings next year, or another?
Absolutely. I have volunteered my county. I've talked with our Office of Emergency Management, which is under the Commissioner's office. We have a brand new building that's a very large space with lots of very large screens and all the hybrid capability. Also, my staff, my DNR staff, our emergency services staff, some of the communities that's doing the Fireshed Coalition and others I've spoken with all of them. They're all willing to do whatever we need to do to host you all to see projects. I kind of volunteered, Director McCombs, I'm going to volunteer. Maybe we can get a tour of the nursery too, if that's okay, and some other folks, and even have some discussion from CSU about people that might be interested. And just as a personal point of challenge for me, being I'm pretty sure I'll be the chair next year of the Board of County Commissioners. Tuesdays are hard for me, so I might have to just chair 1 hour of my administrative meeting on the Tuesday mornings, but the rest of the day I could move around as long as I have enough time. But Tuesday mornings are usually hard days. But if I can step out to chair a meeting for an hour, I think those days work okay, and I appreciate having the heads up so we can plan around. But we certainly in Larimer County would love to host all of you, and we have lots of places to stay and great breweries and great places to visit. So I would like to volunteer my county for April if you'd like to come up and visit.
Great, thanks, Jody. Appreciate that. It looks like I saw Holly put in the chat as well. Douglas County would also be willing to host, it looks like, too, which would be great as well. Any other communities think that they maybe have the capacity and ability to host? And you can think about it. We don't have to decide the second, but Okay, and CSU can help host too. Okay, great. That's great, Matt. Thank you.
And
Okay.
one thing I just
Yeah,
thought
Dan.
of is if it would be useful to pair any of these sort of in-person traveling meetings with the opportunity for field trip. If there is a good project or something to note along the way or at that location to we could look at whatever projects are interesting in that location.
We have several projects that are within an hour from CSU or from the Office of Emergency Management, which can host probably at least 60 to 100 people in those rooms. So, because that's the site of our, where they bring everyone in for mass casualty or mass incidents. So, and then of course the nursery is right there. And so there's plenty of places to see and post-fire flooding as well. I can show you. There's all kinds of opportunities here that we could share up here.
Okay, and then also, what about having potentially like one Western Slope meeting as well? Any ideas on that? I could look into Summit County, but I'm just trying to think. Be nice to kind of move around a little bit.
Dan, this is Amy Moyer. We have hybrid meeting capabilities at our offices at the River District in Glenwood Springs, which might be a potentially a centrally located spot, but happy if there are other West Slope communities. I know we talked about a few last time that might want to host as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amy. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is Hillary. The ski area owns the large conference hotel and the conference center in Mountain Village above Telluride, and is very interested in forest health issues. So I could look into that option as well. So keep us on the list and I'll explore that with the ski area to see if they'd be willing to host.
Great. Thanks, Hillary. Mark Morgan.
Yes, if anyone had any interest, I could pursue the opportunity to do some on-site work for projects that have been completed around here or biomass projects. If anybody wanted to see any on-the-ground tours, I think we could provide that.
That'd be great, Mark. I think most of us would love to do something like that. Especially me. Okay, any other ideas for a future meeting? Are travel expenses reimbursed like fire commission? There's a question from Carol.
Not yet. So this council unfortunately has no budget. So we are fully volunteer. Director McCombs and DNR are having some conversations about whether that could change in the future. So we'll keep having those conversations and we'll certainly let you know as soon as that changes.
Great. Okay. Let's move on then, and we're scheduled for a break right now. So how's that sound? 5 or 10 minutes? We're scheduled 10 minutes. Is that good? Okay, thumbs up enough. Okay, what time is it? Let's come back at 10:40. Thanks, everyone. Okay, let's get started here with this next agenda item. So we've had members request an update from the U.S. Forest Service and the Colorado State Forest Service regarding staffing challenges and strategies. And we thought we would have Jackie and Matt kind of give us an overview from their perspectives on staffing challenges and strategies. So I don't know who wants to start. Jackie, looks like you're in cell phone coverage right there. Maybe you should start.
Yeah, I was going to say, hey, can I go? Because I actually have good cell coverage.
Okay.
So we actually are making some progress. Quite frankly, we've had some personnel changes in our HR, and we've got a new person in that is figuring out how to do some things. So, you know, we're doing, I'd say we're improving. Of course, we're still working with Matt. You know, we shifted, I think, 1.9 million to Matt to help us build some capacity under our Good Neighbor Authority. And so I think I see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but still a long way from there. Had an interesting conversation yesterday with Christina and the Denver Water and actually Colorado Springs Utility, Mark Shea. But we were talking about also exploring maybe working with CFRI. And I think Matt touched on this a little bit ago about some of the work that Tony Chang and his folks are doing in regard to capturing the data. Like, what are we planning to do and what are we actually doing? And quite frankly, we all have struggled with that on the federal side, but even on the state side, our state partners, it's hard to jive to get all of our information fed in and, timely and into a common platform that we can all deal with. So we've committed to do a little work talking to Tony and those folks on, is there a way to expand that? Again, helping us just keep up with some really critical work. The one thing for us is accountability piece, and having stuff in the system is critical. Our secretary goes in, I think, weekly to look at our accomplishment reporting. And, there's always this question of, our folks in the field are saying, no, we really have this many acres, but the system doesn't always reflect that. So we're doing some work around that, Dan. We are under continuing resolution, I think, till mid-December right now. And so, that puts us a little bit in a holding pattern, making the assumption that we're going to be probably static from where we were last year. And I say that on appropriated dollars. Of course, the big question is, how's the mix for IRA and bills going to come in? And, we asked for 38 million for the Front Range project alone, not including other potential bill opportunities or projects. And they haven't given us kind of the layout for how IRA is going to be allocated, or how the competition is going to be laid out, or any of that yet. So we're kind of holding on that too. We think that meeting on the 14th of November is kind of an indication. I mean, what we're hearing is they may shift to support some of the 10 approved projects. They may shift some of that support to the IRA money and maybe give us some ability to bring on additional projects under bills. But all that has to be worked out yet. And so we'll see. And I think, of course, we all know the day that week in November coming up, election, folks are, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and if there are any impacts from that. Let me see. I think you also wanted President Biden's executive order on strengthening the nation's forests and communities. And again, I think all of this is tied together, but we don't have a lot of clarity yet or details. So stay tuned. I expect in the next 30 days that'll come fast and furious. And then interesting. And so we have work to do. And I think we as a group collectively need to take this on, and maybe Matt or a few other folks touched on this, of we're trying to figure out, the old paradigm of we had targets and we had to accomplish X amount of acres and X amount of CCF. And then we started having all these conversations switch to outcome based, like, moving from a current condition to desired condition. And that's when you really, can say you've got the job done. But that may take, 2 to 3 to 4 entries into 1 acre to do that, depending on what you're trying to achieve and the amount of shift. And so, interesting, I'll just say, I got the indication yesterday, we're getting target. Last year, we didn't get targets. We didn't have targets that were handed to us by the Washington office. Now, the indication I got yesterday is we're going to have CCF targets, and we're probably going to have acres, given to us. But I don't know what that's going to look like yet. But I think we all, I think the right thing is to talk more about outcomes than hard, just acres treated. So I would ask, this group in particular to help us carry that message forward about the importance of it isn't just, boots on an acre once, and how do we really recognize the challenge and the value to, getting from that current condition to the desired condition. So I think that's what I have right now, but a little bit of hope is springing on the hiring front. Not fixed. I'm not saying it's fixed, just saying we've actually seen some positive gain on that front. So I think that's what I got, Dan.
Thanks, Jackie. Let's move it over to Matt, and then we can open up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Director Gibbs. And thanks, Jackie. So let me start with some of the successes that we've had through GNA with our federal partners. Jackie mentioned a $1.9 million infusion into a Good Neighbor Authority agreement that's going to stand up a marking and prep crew, which is going to support activities on the north and south components of the 10-year strategy identified areas. In addition, I think there's 2 additional positions, foresters that will be State Forest Service employees that will be plugged in to, again, supporting project design, layout, contracting execution associated with cross-boundary work in those same areas. And we're hoping to grow that, continue to grow that relationship and keep identifying target areas where the State Forest Service can be a relief valve for our federal partners, and where they can make investments in the state that will yield outcomes that are critically important to both the U.S. Forest Service as well as Colorado communities. And that relationship is also growing with our friends at BLM. And so we are in the early stages of working through some initial agreements around capacity in key areas where the BLM has goals and objectives associated with this sizable investments in Bill and Ira, Uncle Bill and Cousin Ira. That's a stupid joke, but I keep making it. And so great opportunities to move forward in shared stewardship through the unique authorities that originated here, that were built here, the Good Neighbor Authority. So that's super cool. Staying on that theme, $1.5 billion allocated for urban and community forestry, which is awesome in the IRA. And I think, many of you, I'm hoping some of you, if not many of you, know Dana Coelho, our program manager for urban and community forestry in the CSFS. If you don't know her, you're gonna get to know her, because she's hardcore and is really driving some really cool initiatives forward. And part of that's going to be around staffing. We engaged with the national program as well as the regional program in recent conversations in recent months. And we see great opportunities to leverage those investments with an incredible network of NGOs and communities that are deeply committed to green infrastructure. And so that's going to stand up, and we think that some staffing will come out of that engagement as well, because we're being encouraged by our federal partners to consider staffing as part of any program that we might advance for funding. We're hemorrhaging employees. It's brutal. I mean, luckily they're going to like counties. I think every county that has a wildfire mitigation program looks at our employees as really great opportunities to take highly trained, super competent, and deeply invested resources and plug them into their own programs. So it's really, in my mind, is not exactly a loss, but it is as far as the agency is concerned. And that's because we can't compete in the marketplace right now as it relates to our salary. So some really good news there is that we completed a salary study and analysis. We're in the final stages of engaging with the CSU system to get some authorities to make some moves. And we have, luckily, with the sizable investments that have been made in the State Forest Service in the last couple sessions, as well as some increases in fundings in our base allocations from our consolidated payment grant program. That's the funding that we receive from the U.S. Forest Service every year. We're feeling pretty confident we're going to be able to make some moves without having to go to the legislature, without having to go to CSU, which is awesome, right? To have some of your own destiny, and hopefully that will stem some of the exodus in the near term and make us an employer of choice. But I will be totally candid, and I'm getting better and better at this, about acknowledging part of my job is to ask for resources. I will come back to this group when with some real data-driven information in consultation with DNR and others on how we might make some small investments in the agency in the long run to, again, make us competitive, keep CSFS employees in CSFS, and then benefit from a sustained workforce, because that's, highly experienced, highly trained foresters are the kind of people that can go out and knock it out, lay it up and knock it down. And that's what we need in order to move aggressively, maintain the sense of urgency, and have success. And the last two things I just want to highlight within this frame is that we've also doubled the amount, actually quadrupled the amount of investment we were able to make as an agency in internships with not only CSU forestry school students, but also students from across the state of Colorado. That funding was matched by the Warner College. And so we're going to grow from like 3 to 4 interns to 12 to 15 next year. And those are all designed to come into another thing that we're in the final stages of putting forward, which is what I'm calling the 579 program. That's referring back to like the GS 579 scale. Those are career ladder positions. And we're hoping that we can take interns, non-competitively promote them to forestry techs, and then put them in that forester, supervisory forester pipeline. So grab hold of these young, hard charging foresters as their interns, little try before you buy, and then put them directly into a pipeline for employment at the State Forest Service and in other state agencies where they might have interest. So that's never happened before, and huge credit to Aaron Green at the State Forest Service for moving that through the CSU HR system. It was a Herculean task. Last but not least, NGO capacity. So just over $15 million being invested in through stimulus dollars, and then the base allocation of $8 million per year in furworm, I think is going to create some great opportunities for us to invest in NGOs using the capacity authority we have, capacity building authority under furworm, to grow some of that NGO capacity that will hopefully be a natural augmentation to the foresters and the planners that we have at the federal level, the state level, the county and community level, all the way down to that NGO level. So I'm excited to see what those. It closed yesterday, the furworm open RFP, and so we'll see what came through. But I'm hopeful that capacity building will continue to be something we can invest in, so that we activate that NGO community across the state that's deeply interested in participating, like directly in the planning implementation of wildfire mitigation, forest health, and watershed health treatments. And I'll stop there.
Great, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I just want to open up to questions now. It looks like Vaughn maybe has his hand up. Vaughn?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And kind of a comment and a little bit of FYI here. And I think you know this, and Matt does as well. Some of the meetings we've been at, but I just want to point out when you look at this recruitment, retention, staffing, it's a Western-wide United States issue, and it's also a fire management and a forest management side of the house. We're seeing similar trends, in both issues. Some of my counterparts in states like Oregon, Washington, that are, they're making sizable investments into their fire programs, fire management, forest management. They're struggling with the same thing. Now they finally have the money. How do they hire? Even places like Alaska, they can't find foresters, believe it or not. So what we're seeing, on the fire side is the highest paid, career fire departments that used to have, a 10-to-1 applicant ratio, they're down to 4 or 5 to 1. They're stealing our employees, federal employees. We had done some work internally with our existing funds, kind of like Matt did, to make sure we were competitive with the federal agencies. Now with some of their infrastructure money coming in and the short-term one-time bonuses, they've kind of passed us. So anyway, it's a bigger issue there where we're trying to come up with some creative solutions from our side at the state. We're just trying to remain competitive. Like Matt said, we don't want to blow every fire department out of the water, but we want to be competitive. And our job is, when that fire chief or that sheriff's having a bad day or their worst day ever, when the state goes to assist, we want good quality, competent people helping there. And then kind of closing the loop here and tying it together. So one of the current 3 subcommittees on the Fire Commission is looking at recruitment and retention for paid firefighters. There was some pretty good legislation last winter for some on the volunteer side, and now we're switching. So anyway, big picture, hopefully we can leverage, stuff together and use good ideas to get both sides of this equation staffed up appropriately. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Vaughn. Appreciate that. For Matt and Jackie, are you also hearing, the challenges with the housing market as well, especially in certain parts of the state? And do you offer like special COLA benefits to if it's a particular region that's a little bit more expensive than another region in Colorado?
So we don't have the ability to change any of that at a regional or state level. So like Denver and the Front Range, it falls into the high, a high locality. We get a 24%, I think, locality pay. But then, we know there's areas like Aspen and Vail that, Dan, what the cost of living out there is, and we don't have the ability to pay that. Or to recognize that, through pay. Now, when we will hire someone, we can give them some incentives that can be paid out like over 2 or 3 years to try to offset that, but it's still pretty limited. And then, if we want to keep them beyond the 2 to 3 years, we have nothing to offer them. So it's still a challenge. I think we recognize that nationally. The agency and the department are trying to do some work around that. And we've actually put a team together at the regional office to see what we can come at working locally, with counties and states maybe to partner on, low income housing or, land usage kind of agreements or I don't know. We're just wide open because we know we need to take some action on that, Dan.
Yeah. To Jackie's point, I remember being a ranger in the Eagle Holy Cross in the Vail Valley and always being jealous of the fact that our friends in the metro area had a COLA, but there's nothing across the Western. So, but that, and there's rigid rules around how those things work on the federal side. And Jackie and the region, and they've always been so good at leveraging every tool that they had, bringing people in to make them stick. On the state side, we're just trying to get to a sort of a competitive salary so that people can potentially survive in some of these mountain communities. But we don't have any authorities or much less any additional funding to supplement folks that are living high cost areas. And if you look where our field offices are, they're all, many of them are in extremely, some of the highest rent, and highest average home sale in the state. And that it's a huge challenge, which just makes it so, if you do have somebody that's it's with the agency, they've got a place to live, you want to hold on to them so bad, right? Because it's so hard to bring new people into some of those communities, acknowledging the challenges associated with high cost of living. That being said, we are making sure that every supervisory forester at all of our field offices, as well as our area managers, are making sure that every employee and that the CSFS employee is one of those targeted like workers that they can qualify for some of the programming and some of the affordable housing projects that go on in some of our mountain communities, to make sure that they're getting into those lotteries, that were listed as a targeted worker or type of work, and to the extent that we can. And so those are really the only initiatives that we've moved forward to date around that issue.
Great, thank you. Hillary, looks like you have a question.
I do. Just a comment on housing opportunities in the Farm Bill. There was a kind of pilot project in the Farm Bill 5 years ago that proposed administrative Forest Service lands to local governments, or partnering, Forest Service to partner with local governments for long-term leases on those lands to provide housing. Summit County's been able to take advantage of that, and someone else, I can't remember who, and we found it a little tricky in San Miguel County because of the sort of interpretation of the language, but it's something that we continue to explore and are hopeful that the next round of Farm Bill updates, which are happening, I believe, this year, will expand that language a little bit to make that more of a tool for workforce housing. And one of the things we were exploring was, that direct partnership with the Forest Service in not only the acquisition of land, but in housing local Forest Service employees. So maybe that's something we could put together. Just I know at least Senator Bennett's been doing some listening sessions around the state on the Farm Bill. Maybe we could explore what the language is out there. I can't recall the title off the top of my head, but it's somewhere in all my notes. And this group could propose some changes to open up that language a little bit, which would then provide housing, which is equally important, as we all know, for employee retention as much as pay.
Great. Good point, Hillary. All right. Any other comments regarding kind of workforce and housing? I think it's a tough market for all the different professions right now. Yeah. Okay, let's move to welcome our committee chairs to provide committee updates. So on my list first, I have Legislative Committee.
Thank you, Director Gibbs. So we kind of covered a lot of Legislative Committee. We had Representative Cutter come to our meeting and present on the bills. And
oh, Jody, you may want to take yourself off video. We can't, the internet's messed up a little bit.
share some insights, and then we had that very robust conversation. Okay, how's that? I apologize about internet. So we covered a lot of what we talked about in the Legislative Committee. Does that help better?
That is better, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we've had a lot, as we've discussed before, with all the amendments to the current language of those bills that were proposed by the Wildfire Interim Matters Committee. That was the big bulk of our discussions. And we again thank Representative Cutter for coming from one of our meetings to have a discussion on those bills and kind of the insights to how the committee was approaching those bills. And so that was a great bulk of our work. We also had a presentation from Christy Bilton about other mitigation measures with grazing and private industry and ranchers using grazing and moving forward with logging. And so she had a really nice, some insights to share with all of us. We also had some discussions regarding Commissioner Tisdale brought a document for us to kind of look at. We had just a very brief discussion on retrofitting homes in the wildland urban interface and that kind of resources that he was sharing with us from the Fire Commission. And we had some of that discussion about the Fire Commission work. And I think that's basically the bulk of our discussion. So we also had a discussion about the, as Angela shared earlier, about the responsibilities and roles of the Forest Health Council when it comes to dealing with the legislative opportunities coming forward to support or testify on these bills. And we had a discussion on maybe it'd be better to see if we had kind of a tag team or come in twos or threes to help kind of support some of these bills, because we all have different levels of expertise. And so we had that kind of discussion as well. And so that's really, that was our focus, was the legislative bills that were presented in those in-depth conversations there. So that's all I have to share today. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Jody. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move to Amy Moyer, and she'll give us an update on the Leveraging Resources Committee.
Thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. The Leveraging Resources Committee meets monthly on the first Monday of every month. And I have just a compilation of some of our discussion points and some of our potential recommendations that I just want to clarify have not been fully approved or voted on by our committee yet, or prioritized. So these are really just for discussion purposes and a good summary of what we've been talking about over the last few months. And so, like we included in our annual report, we've been looking basically at two areas. So the first, shared strategies and visions for how resources and funding are directed on the ground. And then another overarching bucket of strategies to leverage existing funding streams or to increase the use of those programs. And so one of the main items that we've been discussing on shared strategies and vision for how resources and funding are directed on the ground is this concept that I mentioned earlier of a pre-fire playbook that would complement the post-fire playbook that's already in existence. And the thought process behind this is that the pre-fire playbook would identify roles and organizations, contacts, and opportunities for technical assistance and bring clarity to pre-fire resources. I think particularly at the state level, where there are multiple departments and divisions within departments that have an area of expertise with pre-fire activities, while also facilitating consistent communication across all of our field staff. And so allowing this to be a resource for communities, but also a consistent resource for our field staff. The hope is that it would be a catalyst to bring together interests, not just directly within a watershed, those that live within a watershed, but anyone who has interest. And so we've had some conversations about watersheds and source water areas that are not directly within a service area, but are important inputs into some of our water servicers. So again, the hope is that the pre-fire playbook would act as a connector between pre-fire stakeholders with also post-fire actors. And we're going to need more of that coordination and collaboration. We've had some discussion of acknowledging that fuels treatments are not going to get on the ground fast enough ahead of wildfire that's going to shape the landscape. So better connecting these actors earlier in the process is a good idea. And then we've talked a little bit about Utah's Watershed Restoration Initiative. We've also had some of those discussions that we've had as a Forest Health Council of how do we connect all of the various efforts across the state in one platform so everyone can better understand. So we've just had some initial discussions there and have also noted that example from Utah. So with the pre-fire playbook, we're also going to have Chris Sturm, who we mentioned earlier, come present to us at our next meeting on the Wildfire Ready Watersheds Initiative, just knowing that a pre-fire playbook would be a really integral concept with the work that CWCB is leading on that front. So capacity building has also been a top topic for us and I think the Forest Health Council as a whole. And so we have also recognized that housing and salary are among the largest capacity barriers and have had some discussions that it's a good segue and how could we explore hazard pay, cost of living adjustments, creative housing solutions for both permanent and seasonal and non-fire and fire positions. Some of our discussions have I included an example that forestry positions are often not included as an eligible employment to qualify for affordable housing opportunities at the local level. So thinking about if there are any strategies that there are recommendations that we could provide to improve those areas, which I know are difficult. And then we've also talked about what Commissioner Cooper mentioned, the Forest Service Flexible Partnership Act, and gathering feedback potentially for the next farm bill on how can we better use that authority for leasing Forest Service lands for affordable housing, and potentially hearing from communities that have explored that authority and have also recognized that that would be great to hear from either communities or the U.S. Forest Service on that authority as folks are thinking about the next farm bill. And then to round out capacity, there's also been a recognition that there's also the administrative capacity barriers as collaboratives are becoming so essential to connecting all of the work. There is a big need for tracking funding, the grant writing, the reporting, coordination efforts. That is also a big capacity barrier. And then just to wrap up, in terms of the other overarching bucket of strategies to leverage existing funding streams, we've had great communication with DNR on the wildfire mitigation funding compilation and providing feedback into how to make that a meaningful tool, and how to also work with the Colorado State Forest Service Natural Resources Grant database to drive folks to those resources, but also to complement outreach efforts with the Colorado State Forest Service field offices, and really making sure that using those resources in tandem with recommending that folks reach out to their field staff on these resources has been an important discussion as well. So I'll pause there. Certainly welcome any of the other members of the Leveraging Resources Committee to weigh in, but that's been the primary components of our discussions.
Great. Thank you, Amy. Thanks for that update. That sounds like a lot of great work that's being done, so I appreciate that. Do any other Leveraging Resources Committee members, or for that matter, any legislative committee members as well, want to add any additional items? And if not, are there any questions for Jody or Amy? Going once, going twice. Oh yeah, Hillary.
Yeah, this is kind of a bigger concept, but this is the perfect group to, I think, help facilitate this conversation. The idea of, well, so the GMUG Forest Plan is happening right now, and counties have been cooperating agencies in that process. So we've been at the table with the forest, really working on the language in the forest plan. And one of the things that we continue to struggle with is what is they are charged with in the 2012 planning rule is this idea of balancing social, economic, and ecological resiliency or sustainability. I don't like to use that word. I think resiliency is a better descriptor of where we're trying to go in the language of the forest plan. And several of us have been really challenged with that effort at the GMUG level. And I mean, I'll just put it out there that we find in our region of the State Forest Service that we're very challenged with implementation of projects here as well. And very thankful for the leadership of Director McCombs, who's getting in there to change that. But I think that this is certainly worthy of an ongoing conversation and an opportunity to develop sort of shared language around how to achieve those goals through, you know, through both language at the state and at the federal level. And we have everybody in the room sort of at this table. So I know that that's kind of a bigger concept, and it also requires some pretty bigger cultural changes that at least is happening at the state level. And I think, you know, many of us hope is happening at the federal level too. So I wonder if there's just an opportunity. I'm not super clear on what that looks like, but I wonder if there's an opportunity for us to use one of our meetings to really kind of start this conversation of all those things that Director McCombs was talking about, just better coordination at the state and local, state and federal level, because ultimately, as much as all of the agencies are compartmentalized and have your different charges and different funding sources, et cetera, when it comes down to the local implementation, that's where we need to see this change happening. And we don't really care who the agency is. We just want to see consistent application of those priorities of economic, social, and ecological resiliency. So it's a little bit more of a brainstorming, larger scale session, but it's got to get down into language that we can use, that then we can, have shared agreement on implementing in forest plans and in the goals of the State Forest Service. So sorry, I can't be a little more specific. It's been a bigger concept that I've been thinking about for a long time, and it's really challenging, which is why I haven't really developed the specific language or specific ideas about how to get there. But I think this is the group certainly to do that, because we are the forest health group. So we're not compartmentalized to only focusing on wildfire mitigation. We can step back and look at the bigger picture of forest health for years to come.
Yeah, thanks, Hillary. Let's maybe set up a meeting offline and flesh out some of those concepts and see how we can tackle some of those issues for future meetings. Be good. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move to our next agenda item, and we have an update by Katie McGrath Novak. She's the coordinator for the Colorado Forest Collaboratives Network. And Katie, thanks for joining us. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Good morning, everybody. I just joined, so hopefully I won't be repeating anything that people have already said. I gave a presentation a couple months ago on here, kind of outlining what the Forest Collaboratives Network is, but in case anyone missed it, I'll just give like a super quick overview. This is a brand new network. It just started officially, I think we kicked off in May. And our goal is to connect place-based forest collaboratives to information and resources and each other. And then one of our big goals is to share collaborative stories to places like the Forest Health Council to make their value and needs understood. So while Aaron is gone, I'm just going to kind of step in quickly to give an update on what we've been learning from some regional forums that we put on last month. So we put on 4 across the state, and these were really to better understand the nature of what's going on in collaboration in Colorado right now, and then come up with action items for what we as the network can provide moving forward to support collaboratives. So we had 4 of these meetings, and we had about 45 organizations were represented. We were trying to go through and see, it seems like about half were actually representatives of place-based forest collaboratives, and then about half were like agency partners and other support organizations. And a big part of these was just like a listening session to understand what collaboratives are facing as far as challenges. So we identified a couple of key categories of challenges that collaboratives tend to face. One of them was a policy barrier. So we learned that a lot of people in forest collaboratives don't know that the Forest Health Council exists or what they do. And so one of the things that we would like to do on behalf of the network is kind of gather up collaborative perspectives and share them to the Forest Health Council level. But also we would like to communicate what the council is doing back down to collaboratives so that they are aware of what's going on. I mean, these are some of the people doing some of the best like landscape scale work. And so I think it's important that they know what's going on as well. We heard a lot about funding and capacity. And I think Amy was just talking a little bit about this right when I joined, but they especially for things like grant writing, building and growing new organizations, facilitation, conflict management, capacity for those things are a pretty major issue for a lot of the collaborative groups around the state. And then we also did a mapping exercise at these regional forums where we looked at where relationships were existing and what collaborative groups were getting out of them. And we saw that there were some really strong relationships within regions, particularly in the Southwest and then in like the Front Range area. But there weren't as strong of connections across the state, like from the Southwest to other locations or on the Western slope, things like that. So over the next couple of months, we'll continue to listen to collaboratives and share up kind of their challenges and ideas. I also wanted to put in a little plug to all of you. Next Thursday, October 27th, we are having our annual summit. I don't know if any of you have attended this in the past, but there have been them in the past hosted, I think by the State Forest Service for a while, and then by JW Associates for a while. And this is going to be a time to gather collaborative groups from all across the state to share ideas and information. And we're doing a fairly large segment on the Forest Health Council. So we're going to have a couple of speakers come and give updates, and then also do some sort of a listening session where the collaborative groups can share more specific ideas up to the top. So it would be great to have as many Forest Health Council representatives there as we can get, and I'll drop the link to the registration in the chat once I'm done talking. But you're all welcome to come. It's a free event. We'll have food provided, and there's travel funding available if you need support to attend in any way. So that's kind of a super broad update from our end. I'm curious if anyone has any questions or if there's anything that you think it's really important for me to communicate to the collaboratives at this summit.
All right, thanks, Katie, for being here. Let's open up to any questions. Hillary, I see your hand is up. Is that for right now or from before? I'm curious, Katie, I know you've had some regional meetings around the state. I've participated in some. I know Dr. McCombs has as well. Are you hearing certain themes that are starting to resonate a lot, with the different collaboratives now that you're working very closely with them that we should be aware of?
As far as policy themes, right now, we mostly talked to the groups about like their general awareness of the Forest Health Council. We didn't get super deep into like specific recommendations outside of the Glenwood Springs meeting that you attended. They were all very interested in smoke policy and prescribed burning, trying to make that more accessible. So we're still working on gathering those more specific recommendations from them, because at these meetings, it was more like broad challenges and how the network can support them.
Okay, great. Okay, questions? Any questions for Katie? Okay, but you'll put in the chat, or okay, it looks like Christy has a question or comment.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Katie. This is helpful. And just for my own information, the Colorado Forest Collaboratives Network, is that a government entity, or is it a private entity or nonprofit? I was just curious.
Yeah, so we are associated with Colorado State University. So I classify us as like a nonprofit slash state. It's kind of a confusing thing. So we're based out of the Center for Collaborative Conservation, and currently we're grant funded.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Other questions?
I'll also put a link to our webpage in the chat if anyone wants to follow up on that too.
Okay, great.
Hey, Katie, I have one question for you. Do you have a sense for what proportion of forest collaboratives you have sort of mapped or, have in your database what proportion of them participated in the regional forums, or you're getting RSVPs or going to participate in next week's meeting?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we think we have a pretty comprehensive list of the collaboratives that are out there, which we got from the Atlas of Collaborative Conservation, which can also be found on our website. So just based on that list is about 45. I would say we probably have had representation from 20 to 25 so far. And it's a little difficult to map because there are people who are associated with multiple. So that's like a guess. And we're really trying, we've been trying to use our network to reach out to other people who then spread out to their networks. So if you have connections with people who are a part of those place-based groups. I think a lot of the really small ones, those are really our target audience because those are the ones that I think often need the most support. And they're also the ones that are more difficult to get a hold of and find the time to show up to a meeting like this. But like I said, we have pretty generous funding available for a broad range of travel support, whether that be paying for time or even things like childcare. I know that can be a barrier. So we're really trying to eliminate those barriers. So I would appreciate also if you all could use your networks to share that out.
Great, thank you. Samantha.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Appreciate the info. I was just curious if you all interface with CPW's Regional Partners Program or what that collaboration looks like. I know we talk a lot about collaborative fatigue, so just curious where overlap is, if any.
Yeah, we actually, CPW, we haven't had as much interaction with. We've worked a lot with the State Forest Service, US Forest Service, and then DNR. But CPW, I mean, I know CPW is within that, but yeah, I don't know if we've had much. Do you have like a contact that we could get in touch with specifically, or are you that contact?
I am not, but I know Dan and Angela do.
Yeah, we can, Katie, we can get you in the loop on that. I think, Samantha, that's a great idea. We have outdoor regional partnerships around the state, and we're working to build on those as well. So that'd be a great entity to kind of be familiar with and understand where we have these collaborative networks set up around the state.
Yeah, that sounds great. Those are the sorts of things that we're definitely trying to identify all of them, and it's kind of a constant effort because there's so much going on.
Yeah. Christina.
Thank you. Samantha's question spurred my question. So thank you, Samantha. So with the roundtables, like the basin roundtables, I'm curious if there's opportunity to just even let those folks know about the Forest Collaborative meetings in the future. The reason I say that is I feel like the roundtables are kind of trying to figure out like how forestry fits in. They're all really interested in it. And so it might just be an easy thing to share with the basin roundtables. So I just wanted to throw that out in case there's any interest. I don't know, maybe there has been folks attending from the roundtables, some of these meetings, but just wanted to throw that out as an option.
Yeah, and I think we've got those people on our list. I'm not sure if all of our contacts are super up to date, because I think we haven't gotten much response from those groups. So maybe I'll just send you a private message and see if my contact information is even correct.
Yeah,
we can. Yeah, it's Water Conservation Board. That's part of one of my divisions. They kind of help work and help kind of staff those meetings around the state. There's actually a Southwest meeting today, but most of the roundtables meet monthly. So that's something that great idea, Christina. We can plug Katie into those and maybe give an update and stuff as a way to introduce the organization and everything. So
yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, other questions? Comments? Okay, seeing none. Yeah, thanks again for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, and I'll throw those couple of links and then my contact information in the chat.
Okay, awesome. Okay, next up we have roundtable updates. So these are topics that you all can raise on what you're working on or anything you think we should know about for the entities you all represent. And I know we've been talking a lot about different topics here today, but any items that you want to raise right now? Yeah, Christina.
I can just give a brief update. So Madeline McDonald on my staff was appointed to Biden's Wildfire Commission, and congratulations, Dan, and congratulations, Mike Morgan, and all our Colorado reps. So anyways, that's an awesome opportunity, and I'll try to provide updates where appropriate. But Dan, certainly you know firsthand. So just wanted to throw that out there and congratulate Madeline. And then from at least a Denver Water Forest to Faucets perspective, we we committed another 3 million ish per year through 2027. So for federal lands and non-federal lands. And we also are working with Colorado Forest Restoration Institute on a treatment optimization process. So trying to think about how to get the right acres, even though they may be the toughest ones, but they might be the most meaningful. And then I'm glad there was mention about the Farm Bill. I attended Senator Bennett's Farm Bill listening session. Forestry is certainly a big priority, as well as like Western water. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for engagement and thought around the Farm Bill, and I'm happy to talk to any folks who are interested in engaging on that. We certainly have good connections with Senator Hickenlooper's staff is really engaged, and Senator Bennett's staff. So trying to think about forestry, forest health opportunities for the Farm Bill. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Next up is Scott Jones and then Commissioner Tisdale.
One very quick question, and this is probably very low level compared to what you guys have been talking about today. But if anybody has some educational materials about invasive weeds in a post-fire situation, that would be super helpful for a couple things we're working on. We've gotten into a couple of those burn scars and really started doing some restoration afterwards. And there's been quite a bit of concern about invasive weeds, and from everybody from walking their dogs to horses to OHVs to anything. So if anybody's got some developed materials out there, that'd just be really helpful for us. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Scott. Commissioner Tisdale.
Thanks, Dan. Just a couple of things. First, this is, I believe, probably my last full Forest Health Council meeting. I'm term limited in January. So if anyone has thoughts about who should be recruited to replace my seat, or replace me in this seat for this council, talk to them and tell them that there will be a posting come up at some point soon. I assume the vacancy would be noticed before January. So that's one thing. A couple of things have been published that might be useful that I could make sure. Maybe I've already sent these to Angela, but FEMA put together a handbook. It's an annual, maybe it's a semi-annual handbook for local officials on how to avoid having disasters in the first place, but also what to do when you have them. And they've done a few case studies, but one on the wildfire mitigation regulations for Uray County. The FLA report on the escaped prescribed burn has now been published. Angela, did I send that to you?
I think you
Sims
did.
Fire
I'll
FLA.
take a look and follow up.
Okay, yeah. So just a couple of things have come out, and then Molly Mowry's group, Community Wildfire Planning, is having a seminar on November 7th of 3 jurisdictions in Colorado that have done those kind of mitigation regs. So not all specifically forest health related, but that's just happens to be a series of things that have happened here that I've been involved with. So I can make sure send links to the appropriate places.
Great. Well, thanks, Ben. It's hard to believe that you're term limited. You've been such an amazing participant in this particular council, but I know you've been so involved in chairing the Emergency Fire Fund Committee and being involved with the Colorado Fire Commission as well. So you've been such a great, important voice for counties for many years on forest health and wildfire preparedness. So let's give Ben a huge kind of round of applause and thank you for your service. It's really appreciated, to say the least.
Thank you, guys. It's an honor to work with such a cool group of people. And it's amazing the resources that we see around this screen. And hopefully you'll get back to in-person meetings and next year. So
yeah, we hope so, for sure. Yeah.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, other updates that folks have. It looks like Matt has one, Commissioner. Yeah.
Yeah, real quick, yeah. Thanks, Director Gibbs. So, Christina reminded me, so the legislature last year, as part of the watershed bill, allocated $3 million to the Healthy Forest Vibrant Communities Fund, and those, we were really intent on trying to get those funds to the ground as fast as possible, and so to demonstrate sense of urgency and good return on investment, these kinds of things. But those three projects that I think are preliminarily identified, one in partnership with Colorado Springs Utilities, and then two in partnership and as leverage to the Forest Faucets 3 funding that Christina was referring to. And so there'll be a project that is preliminary, and I say preliminary because my staff would kill me if I locked them in, because we're still trying to lock these down for planning and implementation. But Staunton State Park, and then some work on in the Fraser Valley, and then some work in partnership with Colorado Springs Utilities, which that one, if it moves forward, would be the first time where state funds are being allocated across boundaries, which is a really good signal, I think, to our federal partners that we're just as serious as they are about cross-boundary investment in the highest priority watersheds and areas. And so I just wanted folks to know that we're hopeful that those projects will start getting laid out, potentially some late summer implementation next year. When that is more, we'll be doing some outreach to residents on that topic, and certainly as those come into fruition. But just wanted to let you know that we're really trying to move quickly, and huge credit to staff and working with our key partners in the water community to move and show the legislature and certainly all of our partners that we're serious about getting funds to ground as fast as we can, essentially following the hardcore model that COSWAP has established with their strategic focal areas. I mean, it's demonstrating that you invest in us, we invest in the problems that we're trying to face down. So, and we do it rapidly. So that's very exciting, and we'll give you more information on that when those projects are hammered out. And again, those might be potential places for us to go check out cool work in high priority watersheds and areas that are deeply dependent on healthy forests.
Awesome, great, thank you so much. Other updates? No pressure, but these are all great updates. Okay, well, let's move to public comment. I don't see anyone that's listed on here for public comment. And Angela, we didn't have anyone sign up ahead of time, I don't think, right?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, if we don't have any more public comment, then do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
I'd move. Second.
Okay, everyone's anxious to move on. We'll give you a few more minutes of your time left today. So all those in favor to adjourn signify as aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? I don't think so, probably. Hey, thanks everyone for a really great meeting. Angela was taking detailed notes. We'll get that information out to you all, as well as a list of some of the priorities, and we want you to help us kind of prioritize what you think we should focus on first for 2023. But really appreciate all of your involvement at this meeting, and again, a special thank you to Commissioner Tisdale. You've just been so involved for so many years, and it's just hard to believe that you're term limited. I don't know how that's possible, but
Time
I guess that
flies.
happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gone
Yeah.
quickly, but
Yeah, thank
lots
you.
of fun things in the background. So
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks,
All right.
Commissioner Tisdale. We really appreciate all your work and look forward to catching up with you. I was curious, did we formally just approve of those dates, the formal dates for our meetings next year, so I can get my calendar spaces X'd off?
You know, I think those were items that we wanted to kind of just share with you of some dates we were thinking about. I know for the 26th and I think 27th, I have like the National Fire Commission, so it can't be one of those, but it could be potentially the 25th. So I think we're still kind of finalizing the dates.
I would say for now, block off those dates in your calendars, and we will endeavor to have meetings on those dates. Obviously, as soon as that changes, we will let you know. I think the January meeting is actually the most likely to change just because of that national meeting, whereas the others are far enough out that I think you should feel comfortable blocking them off.
Great, thank you very much.
Great. Awesome. Again, thanks everyone. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks again.